There was a month in the Norse year with a very direct name, gormanudr, slaughter month. In Old English, the same month was called boltna, blood month, roughly what we call November. And it was not named for a battle. It was named for the animals. Every autumn, a farm made a calculation. How much stored hay do we have? How many animals can that hay keep alive until spring? Everything above that number was killed in 1 week. Not out of cruelty. Out of arithmetic. A cow you cannot feed in February dies anyway. And a cow that dies in February is wasted meat. So the herd was cut to fit the hay. Which tells you what winter actually was. Not weather. A budget. And here is the part nobody tells you. The Norse year did not have 4 seasons. It had 2. Summer and winter. 6 months each. There was no spring to look forward to. Winter began around the middle of October. The nights of that changeover had a name. Veteranage. Winter nights. Half your life. Every year was the dark half. Now let's put you in it. Start with the thing people underestimate most. Not the cold. The dark. Central Norway sits around 63 degrees north. In midwinter, that is 4 or 5 hours of usable light. And the Norse did not stop there. They farmed the Lofoten Islands, past 68 degrees. At Borg, archaeologists found a longhouse 83 meters long. That far north, the sun does not rise at all for weeks. Not dim. Absent. And you have no light switch. You have a fire and a bowl of fish oil with a wick in it. Which brings us indoors. Where it gets worse. A longhouse had a hearth running down the middle of the floor. It did not have a chimney. It had a hole in the roof. Tholjori. And a hole is not a chimney. A chimney pulls. A hole leaks. Smoke filled the upper half of the room and stayed there. Everyone lived and slept below it. Which is why you sat down. Standing up, put your head in it. You breathe that for 6 months a year, your whole life. And skeletons from these populations show the damage. Chronic sinus inflammation shows up in the bone itself. It is one of the most common signatures in the skeletal record. An entire society with permanently blocked heads. But the smoke was not a design failure. It was doing 3 jobs at once. It kept the roof dry, so the timber didn't rot. It killed insects in the thatch. And it preserved the food hanging in the rafters. You were living inside a smokehouse. Because the house was not a place to live. It was equipment. Now consider the fire itself. You have no matches. No lighter. Starting a fire from nothing takes flint, steel, and dry tinder. The best tinder came from a bracket fungus off a birch tree. Cut, boiled, pounded flat, dried. A prepared material. In a damp northern winter, all of that gets difficult. So you did not restart the fire. You never let it stop. Someone banked the coals every night under ash. Every night, for months, without failing once. A cold hearth in January was not an inconvenience. It was a walk to the neighbors to beg for embers. And that walk is where the winter starts killing people. Now the fuel. This is where it gets uncomfortable. An open hearth burning 6 months eats an enormous amount of wood. When the Norse reached Iceland, it was substantially wooded. Within a few centuries, almost all of that woodland was gone. Burned, built with, and grazed away by sheep. So Icelanders burned peat instead. And dried dung, which had to be cut and dried in summer. Notice the pattern forming. Everything you need in December was made in July. Which is the real answer to the question. You would not fail at surviving winter. You would fail months earlier in good weather. Because winter food was a manufacturing process. Take the most important one. Stockfish. Cod. Gutted. Hung on wooden racks in the open air. No salt at all. Cold wind and time. It loses most of its weight in water. What is left is nearly pure protein that keeps for years. It is hard enough to be used as a club. Lofoten did this at industrial scale. Dried fish became a northern export, traded south for centuries. Then there is dairy, which had to be stopped from spoiling. Skyr. Milk soured deliberately into a dense storable curd. And its byproduct, sour whey, was a preservative itself. Meat submerged in it kept through the whole dark half. Add smoking, salting, and burying in bogs. None of that is knowledge you have. And none of it can be learned in October. Now clothing, which people assume was the easy part. Wool has a property almost nothing else has. It still insulates when it is wet. In a wet, cold climate, that difference is life and death. So wool was not a fabric. It was a strategic resource. In Iceland, homespun cloth was literally money. Standardized by law, used to pay debts and fines. You could pay a legal penalty in cloth. Now consider what one sail cost. A large square sail is around 100 square meters of wool. Estimates for spinning that much yarn run into person years of one person's continuous work. The rating you picture required an invisible industry behind it, mostly done by women, mostly done indoors, mostly in winter, which corrects something about the whole Viking image. Rating was seasonal work, a summer job. Ships were hauled ashore before the ice. For half the year, a Viking was a farmer in a smoky room, and that half is the half you would not survive. Now here is the part that surprises everybody. Ask which month was most dangerous, and people say January. The coldest month is not the deadliest month. In December, the stores are full. You are eating well. The danger is at the other end. Late winter. The stores are low. Nothing grows yet. Historians call it the hungry gap. Old food is gone. New food has not started. The Norse named these months too. Ori, Goa, deep winter, and the one after it. Icelanders still hold a midwinter feast called Oribult, eating preserved food in the middle of the worst stretch, which is not a coincidence. A feast in February does something arithmetic cannot. It proves the community still has enough to give away. And that proof is the thing keeping people from panic. Meanwhile, the animals are starving too. By March, hay is running out. Farmers fed livestock seaweed, birch bark, thatch off the roof. Animals too weak to stand were carried out to the first grass. There is a word for that in Icelandic sources. Carried out cattle. So no, you would not freeze to death in December. You would fade out in March, indoors, quietly. But we still have not reached the thing that would actually kill you. Because everything so far assumes you have a farm. You do not. You arrive with nothing. No stored hay. No dried fish. No wool. No hearth. Which means your only asset is other people. And Norse society had strong rules about that. Hospitality was close to sacred. A guest was fed and housed. The Havamal devotes verse after verse to how to treat a guest. Warmth, water, food, dry clothes, before you ask his business. Which sounds like generosity. It is generosity. It is also a distributed insurance system. Everyone travels. Everyone can be caught out by weather. So the rule protects the version of you that is stranded next. But notice the limit hidden inside it. A guest is temporary. A guest moves on. A guest who never leaves is a mouth against a fixed store. And the store was calculated in October without you in it. So the question is not whether they are kind. The question is whether anyone owes you anything. Kinship, marriage, oaths, debts, service. Those ties were the actual survival technology. More than the wool. More than the fish. A person with no ties had no claim on anyone's winter. And you can watch this system fail at full scale. Norse settlers reached Greenland around the year 985. They built farms, churches, and lived there for centuries. Then, sometime in the 15th century, they were gone. And the reason is not one dramatic disaster. The climate did cool. Sea ice increased. Grazing got harder. But there is an economic thread researchers keep returning to. Greenland's main export was walrus ivory. It was hunted far north and shipped to Europe. Then elephant ivory reached European markets in quantity. And the value of the thing Greenland sold collapsed. Fewer ships came. Fewer ships means fewer imports. Iron, timber, grain, news, marriage partners. The settlement did not simply get colder. It got disconnected, which is the same failure as one person with no ties, only running at the size of a whole society. So put the whole thing together. You would not be beaten by temperature. Modern people handle cold routinely. That is not the test. The test is whether the previous 9 months were done correctly, whether the hay was cut and how much, whether the fish was hung early enough to dry, whether the peat was dry, whether the herd was cut, whether the wool became cloth before the light went. Every one of those decisions was made before you got cold. Winter did not test strength. It tested planning, and it settled the argument without discussion, which is why the sagas are so full of people counting. Counting animals, counting stores, counting who owes whom. Now here is the part one want to leave you with. You are not softer than they were. Your body is the same body. Your mind is the same mind. What you are missing is not toughness. It is a place inside a system that was built before you arrived. And that is not a fact about the Viking-age. Your winter is solved months before it starts too. By people you will never meet, in places you never see. You do not survive winter. You never did. Something around you does, and you are standing inside it. The Norse could see the whole machine from the inside. You have simply never been shown yours.